So me and my friends went and saw Quantumania, and it was probably one of the most disappointing outings I've seen from Marvel in a while. Setups that went nowhere, payoffs that felt lacking, in a world that truly never felt lived in to begin with. Not to mention that the main characters had little to nothing to do with things just happening to them. Honestly, after watching that movie, I kind of felt defeated. You know, the only mega corporation that's big enough and that has enough money to produce more than one film a year and has enough seats to buy out every single showtime in the theater. They're okay with putting out, you know, and I don't say this lightly, a dog water movie. The next day, despite really not wanting to watch another movie, I gathered up my friends and we watched Mad Max Fury Road. And let me tell you, if you don't remember right now, Mad Max Fury Road fucking rocks. Directed by George Miller, known for films like Babe, Pig in the City, and Happy Feet 2. Am I reading that right? The guy that did this? That's a whole nother can of worms we might get into later, but let's get back on track. Known for the Mad Max franchise, this is the fourth installment of the movie series, which is set in a post-apocalyptic Australia, where cars are worshipped like religious artifacts because they outlive most people, and water scarcity is used to control the general population. And by water scarcity, I mean like the entire ocean is dried up. Fury Road was built from the ground up like a comic book. Most movies have a script written, then do storyboards, then go into pre-production, blah 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 blah. But Miller flipped the script and spent 3 years developing the storyboards first. Doing this prioritized the action and the flow of the story. Doing this also meant that the characters only spoke whenever absolutely necessary. Miller, in an interview, quoted Hitchcock saying that he wanted to create a film that could be watched in Japan without the use of subtitles. But prioritizing the action, what does that mean? What does that look like? In this film, they have real cars, real stunts, real explosions, real fire, real gas, real everything. This ties the film into reality. Whenever one of those cars with metal spikes all over it flips right in front of the camera and we see the flames rushing towards us, we can kind of feel it more so than if it were, you know, CGI or something like that. When we see Tom Hardy hang off the front of a vehicle driven by a psychopath hanging on for dear life, we can feel that. We can feel the weight of him on the front of the car, and we're like clenching our fists on the edge of our seats, waiting to see what happens next. You know, I could be here all day talking about how much this movie is a technical marvel in terms of stunts. And this is one of the movies that shows that stunt work should be recognized by the Academy. The storytelling in this movie is also off the charts good. You know, every single thing they set up, they pay off. It's one of the more satisfying watches I've seen in a while. There's a narrative principle you might have heard called Chekhov's gun, and if you haven't heard it, I'll explain it to you right now. It goes something along the lines of, if there's a gun on the wall in the first act, the gun should be fired in the second act. Pretty much it's just telling authors to get rid of unnecessary story elements. In some cases it's shown to detract from the story as a whole because it disappoints the viewers as to what they could have seen. And this movie follows this principle to an absolute T. Everything has a satisfying payoff, from Max being a blood bag, to the knife and the gear shift, to this man's big elephant foot. Also want to shout out George Miller's wife, Margaret Sixel, who actually won an Academy Award for this movie. Miller said she has a very low tolerance for boring stuff and can often see stuff that he can't. And just to put in perspective how much editing this film really was, the average length of a shot in this movie is 2.6 seconds. The fact that a movie of this scale is coherent at all is a masterpiece, but the fact that they're doing it so fast is, I mean, even more incredible. Kind of reminds me of the husband-wife duo Maria Lucas and George Lucas on the first Star Wars, but that's another can of worms that we might get into one day. Again, the world feels lived in too. The first time we, as the audience, lay eyes on it, it does not feel like it's the first time it has been lived in. All the moving parts of the world make sense, like the guys moving on the wheel, or the living blood bags since, you know, they don't have refrigeration. The cars and outfits feel driven and lived in, and that's because, I mean, they were. Over the course of like 3 months in the North African desert, they were put through absolute hell, flipping and turning and dirt, mud, you name it, like they were doing it. Miller wanted to make sure to maintain a sense of aesthetic because he thinks that humans would maintain their aesthetic even when it comes to like the apocalypse. So Max's badass jacket, or Immortan Joe's badass mask, or this guy's badass double guitar that's also a flamethrower. The feminist themes are super clear in this film too, not only about the storytelling of the women escaping enslavement, but also with themes like new life. Not only thematically, but this movie also just shows a whole lot of badass women as well, like Charlize Theron as Furiosa, and, you know, the slew of wives that Immortan Joe has as well. George Miller made a conscious effort to make sure these actresses understood the hardships of what some of these women victims go through in sex trafficking. And George Miller did that by bringing on Eve Ensler, who is a playwright and who's helped women victims all across the world. She's actually so important to the process that she later hopped on as a script consultant. Anywho, smarter and better qualified people have gone over this topic, so I'll leave it at that. Anyways, that is why I believe that Mad Max Fury Road is one of the textbook examples of storytelling and one of the best movies of the 2010s.